Hello and welcome to the Bergen Fitness Podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Bergen, and today we're going to discuss what to do now that you've completed your Hyrox. If you're watching this, there's a lot going on in terms of doors. It looks like I've got about 5 different doors in a very small vicinity. I'm actually recording in my bedroom today because it's really noisy outside with they're doing roadworks down my road. So yeah, it's really annoying that the lighting's quite yellowy as well. It's annoying because it looks as though it should be really posh and really good quality light because it's like almost like a chandelier, but it's a fake chandelier. It's just a light bulb with loads of decorations around it. Anyway, today we're going to talk about your Hyrox and what to do now that you've completed it, whether that's a sim or the proper Hyrox. We're going to discuss this topic on 3 main key factors and points. That is, first of all, how do I feel? Secondly, what am I proud of? And finally, how can I improve? So I'm going to go into detail of each of those points and discuss them with you. And hopefully at the end of this podcast, you'll have a good idea as to how you can get faster for your next Hyrox or Hyrox sim. So how do I feel? First things first. Whenever I say that, it reminds me of that song that goes first things first on the realist, and it's Iggy Azalea. And it then reminds me of when I was at uni and I wrote a rap and performed it to post on YouTube for 15 quid from my friend. Yeah, times were hard, I needed money. And someone commented saying, "You're white trash, Iggy Azalea." And it just kind of brings me back to that moment. But yeah, anyway, moving on. First thing first, congratulate. So you've just completed a Hyrox. It's not easy. It's become very mainstream to do Hyroxes, so therefore a lot of people forget just how hard they are. I bet when you first signed up, you probably weren't even sure that you'd complete one. So first of all, congratulate yourself on what you've achieved finishing your Hyrox. So when you finish Hyrox, it can feel absolutely amazing. You can be on cloud 9. You can be like ready to look on the website to see when your next one is. Or you can go the other way and you can feel a bit disappointed that you didn't quite reach the time that you had in mind. What I would say in this example is, first of all, was the time that you set yourself realistic? So did you just pluck a time out of thin air for your first ever Hyrox and think that you could just achieve it like that? So that's my first thing that I want you to think about. My second thing that I want to think about is, did you give it your all during the Hyrox? So a lot can happen whereby you didn't quite foresee it was going to happen. So you might have got cramps, you might have felt sick, you might have had a stomach ache, you might have, I don't know, poo mid-race. There's so many things that can go wrong within a Hyrox that you can't control, that can just go wrong on a day. So are you being too harsh on yourself when you're thinking disappointed about your time that you finish with? So yeah, think about that. Think about, did you not do as well as you thought because you'd not done enough training? So had you, I don't know, not focused enough on the things that you're weak at? Did you avoid the stuff that you knew that you weren't as good at because you didn't enjoy it in training, so you avoided it, and then you've come to your competition and you've not performed as well as you'd like with your time, because in that station it might have taken, I don't know, 10 minutes to do something that, had you trained for it more specifically, you might have done a lot faster and brought that time down. Or perhaps you ran too many laps because your focus was lost. And obviously I've been there. I've been there when I was in Poland Hyrox. So I did too many laps because it's hard sometimes, especially when you're like towards the last stages of the event. You can be so mind bogged that you're not thinking straight. So it's very easily done. But the key thing here is that learn from it. So if your race didn't go to plan, then of course you might be a bit disappointed. That's absolutely fine. Like, I'm not telling you not to be disappointed because you can't avoid that feeling. But what I would say is focus more on, right, what you're going to learn from that. So sometimes you can have to wait a couple of days to let the dust settle. So post-event, that disappointment is going to be at a peak, but actually you can start to rationalise it a little bit as the days go by, and you'll probably find that in a couple of days' time you'll see it in a different perspective and you'll be a little bit more proud of yourself rather than disappointed, and then you can start to focus on, right, what now? How can I improve within my next hire to make sure that I'm not disappointed for the next one? I really want you to ask yourself the question, what am I proud of? Because even in those performances with Hyrox where you've gone terribly wrong, or not even terribly wrong, but like things have happened that you didn't foresee, or you didn't quite compete at the level that you thought you would, you didn't quite get the time that you thought you would, there's going to be something in there that you should be proud of. So look deep within yourself. Is it that you had your fastest time on a certain station? Is it that your running felt better and more consistent? So were your splits more consistent? Is it that your ergs were better? Think about what you're proud of with your race, what executed well, And then that brings me on to my next topic of how you can improve. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about this topic because there's a lot to say of how to improve for your next hire. Because for me, after you've done a hire, someone who's very driven to get better and improve for my next one, of course, we've got to ask ourselves the question, how can I improve? And so I'm going to go into detail about that now. The great thing about Hyrox is you can get a rundown of all of your splits for your race for each of the stations. So you know how long it takes you on each of the stations. To find that information, you go to hyrox.com, you click the top 3 lines in the top right corner, and then you go down to rankings. So you click rankings and it'll blow up the race results. You find your race and then you can put your surname on that race and you can find yourself that way in terms of making sure that you've got the right category division on that search. If you struggle to find your name for whatever reason, I don't know why sometimes it doesn't work, but I found that if you scroll down to the advanced search and do it through an advanced search, that it then works. And then on that topic as well, if you want to have a look at your race results from a previous season, on mobile it's quite hard to do that, but if you just turn your phone landscape, I don't know why, those that are watching, I don't know why I needed to show you what landscape looks like, but if you turn your phone landscape / sideways, for those who don't understand what landscape means, and then you click the drop down where it says season 24-25, just go to whatever season you are looking into and you can find your results there. So that's just a top tip in terms of where to look for those splits. When you get on those splits, obviously it's going to give you a rundown of your event. So, for example, the things that I would be looking out for, first of all, is how consistent were your running splits. So if you were starting on 5 minutes running splits, and then towards the end you drop down to 6.5, 7, that tells you that you're going too fast to begin with, or that certain stations within that earlier section of your race has led your heart rate to be so high that you've not been able to maintain the same sort of pace on your running. So first thing first, I've got that song stuck in my head again. First things first, I will look at my running splits and see how consistent they were. Then I will look at my stations in isolation bit by bit. So obviously the first one would be ski erg. So I'd be looking at it. I would be looking at the time that I got, and then I would think about what that would transfer across to as splits per 500 meters on my ergs. So for me, with my training, I know within certain parameters what kind of pace I would look at, and so do my clients. So for example, I'll give you an example of a random person, so let's call him Bob. Bob does ski erg in training, and it says on his monitor the splits of 2 minutes per 500 meters, and in high he's got a time of 5 minutes on his ski. So Bob knows that 2 minutes per 500 meters would be 4 minutes for the 1K. So if he's got 5 minutes on his Hyrox event, he knows that he might have gone either too slow on his ski erg performance, or if he looks at his run before that and notices that his run was way too fast than what he's capable of, that indicates to him that he went off too fast and therefore he wasn't able to maintain his normal pace, and therefore he's dropped his pace by a minute. That's just an example, a loose example of what you might be looking at there. You also want to look at how your runs alter after certain stations. So is it that after your burpee broad jumps that your run considerably went down in terms of pace was a lot slower? Is it that after sled push your pace was a lot slower? And then you can kind of figure out from there, do you need to do work within your training on sled push into run, burpees into run? One thing to note is it's very, very common for people to get a slower run after burpees, because it probably is the station that's going to elevate your heart rate the highest for most people. So just bear that in mind as well when you're looking at your stats. It is quite normal to see that. But if that difference between run 5 after the burpees is massively out from run 4, 3, 2, 1, then you know that, okay, that does really need a lot of work. If you notice as well that your sled push time versus your sled pull time, there's big discrepancy around it, which is quite common for newbies to the sport, because I would say that sled pull is a lot more technical than sled push in terms of how you can really leverage your body and get more out of your body to be able to do the movement. There's a lot more technique to it than I think for sled push. So if you notice that your sled push time is a lot faster than your sled pull time, I'm talking like 3, 4, like numerous minutes here. I'm not saying, because a lot of the people will find, even if you do know good technique with sled pull, that it will take longer than sled push, but I'm talking big discrepancies between your sled pull and sled push time. Then you know that, okay, you've probably neglected your technique work on your sled pull, or maybe you don't even know about technique work on your sled pull and how to improve it, in which case seek advice from a coach who does. My next point would be about looking. So yeah, we were looking through each of the movements and we're looking at the times that we're getting. You can also see where that places you out of everyone within your competition, so within your category. So don't be alarmed if this number is very high, because there's a lot of people who do high now, so you probably find that it will be quite high. That doesn't mean that you're awful at it, but it just gives you a bit of an idea as to how you fare amongst everybody else. I always say don't compare to other people, but what I will say is in comparing from that sense of things, it can really give you an idea as how far away you are from like sort of the norms and the averages. And then you can start to understand if you've really got like, if it's a low hanging fruit, I suppose, like by that I mean if it's a movement where you think you could gain a lot more time back, if that makes sense. On the topic of easier wins, so how are you going to get faster for this high versus your next high? You want to target your training towards the things that you can improve drastically. So when you're looking at improving for your next high, you also want to target those stations where you can get the most time back on. So for example, ski and row, if you've got a relatively good technique on those and you've got a decent, like a half decent time, you might not be the fastest, but it's a decent like time, then spending a lot of time training, trying to improve them isn't going to take your time down as much as say you've got a 6-minute burpee time on your station. You'd be able to, like, you'd make more sense to target your training towards the burpees and knock off a lot more time than the ski and the row, because it's a lot easier to knock off minutes off the burpee than it is the rower, for example. The next thing I want to do is get you to think about the question of, do you think you do enough compromise running in your training, and do you think you do this for a long enough duration? So a lot of people that I speak with, a lot of like people who are frustrated with their performance, they'll often talk to me about their coaching and or their sessions that they're doing, and there's not a lot of compromise running in, i.e. they're not doing a lot of running in stations, and therefore they're not like getting their body used to having to do that, in which case for high you're just setting yourself up to not do as well as you can. Like, we want you to perform as best as you can on the day, and so that means that all the training leading you up to that is really important, and the formats that you're doing within your training sessions are really important. So it's important to consider, have the training sessions that you've done, have they been effective for your end result, for your high, and if not, what needs to change? Is it that you're doing your own training and you have absolutely no idea what you're doing, in which case seek advice from a coach? Is it that you're just doing the exercises that you enjoy in training and you're neglecting the things that you should improve? Is it that you don't know how to improve certain stations? Is it that you're not doing enough running and you think that your running's not improving much? Are you focusing enough on it, or are you focusing too much on the Hyrox stations and not enough running? So it's asking yourself these important questions so that you can give yourself an answer and an action plan to then get faster at your next Hyrox. So if you're someone who knows that your running is a real big weakness of yours, but your stations are generally quite good and you're getting some decent times down on your stations, then it doesn't make sense for you to continue training without targeting that running, because if you can knock 10 seconds off each kilometre, then that's 8 by 10 seconds, which is 80 seconds, which is 1 minute 20 just knocked off your time by being 10 seconds faster in each kilometre. So I would heavily advise anybody who knows that running is their weakness to follow a running program, and if ideally that running program would be by a coach who knows about high. So shameless plug-in, I am a England Athletics accredited running coach, so I do running programs for people, but you can find someone else online if you really wanted to, or you could try and give it a go yourself. But I would definitely say doing a running program alongside Hyrox could be beneficial for you if it is a particular weakness of yours. The next question that I want you to ask yourself is, did you allow yourself enough recovery during your training plan? So a lot of us, I know what it's like, I've done it myself. When you're thriving towards a competition, you can just train, and end up basically overtraining. Has your balance of intense sessions been good with the balance of recovery sessions? Are all your sessions 100% effort? I've learned along the way that 100% effort sessions every single time aren't effective because you can never get 100% out of yourself if you don't allow yourself to recover in between. So having a mix of intense sessions, moderate sessions of intensity, of technique focuses, and then some like zone 2 stuff is really effective to get you ready and prepared for your Hyrox. It's not necessarily the case where doing 100% effort every single time is going to get you a better time than well, it's probably going to get you a worse time because you're going to be overtraining and not getting the most out of your sessions. So consider that question when you're thinking about your training plan that led you to your recent high. Rock zone time. So how long did you spend in the rock zone? Were you dawdling? Did you stop for a drink? Sometimes it's really important to drink. Well, it is really important to drink. It's important to stay hydrated, of course. I'm not telling you not to. But were you dawdling or were you running to the station, drinking as fast as you can, running back out? A lot of people waste so much time in the rock zone. Like I've seen people totals with rock zones be above 10 minutes, and I don't think there's any need for it. Even if you need to walk a little bit, like you can walk a little bit and then sort of get your heart rate down a little bit and then go running rather than just dawdling around in the rock zone. There's no need for it at all. And, you know, I always say to clients, try and get in and out as fast as you can because it really does rack up. So have a look at your rock zone total on your stats as well and see if it's high and therefore how you could knock down some time off your next one by reducing your rock zone time. I think generally it's really important for us to look at our splits because just because you feel good on a station, it doesn't mean that you perform well on it. So what I mean by that is there's such a thing called RPE. So that's rate of perceived exertion. So that's how hard does this exercise feel. So if you're on a sled push, for example, your rate of perceived effort might be that it was easy, but it might have been easy because you were taking far too many rests. And actually, when you look at the times of it, it's really slow. Does that make sense? So what I'm trying to say is the stats are really good for using in conjunction with your perceived exertion. So that if your perceived effort was easy, is it that you did well on that station or is it that you might have not pushed enough on that station? So make sure that when you're looking at your stats, maybe put like an RPE number, do it like say 0 out of 10, 10 being the hardest you've ever done and 0 being easy. And then you can get an idea of how it is in terms of times, in terms of performance, but also perceived effort. Because that's quite an important marker for you to have. On that topic, how was your mindset? So in terms of when we're perceiving effort, effort can be seen as not like as harder if we make it harder in our mind. So what I mean by that is if you're, say you're doing burpee broad jumps and it's feeling horrible in your head, then you start to slow down, your confidence is gone, you start to panic because your heart rate is up here. So your heart rate's elevated, and then your mindset in being sort of more defeatist is slowing you down anyway. So it's thinking about how was your mindset performance during this race? Was there any moment at all, if you look deep within yourself, was there any moment at all where you thought, what the hell am I doing? Or if you thought, God, this is awful, or were you giving yourself loads of negative self-talk that was working against you? Was there anything that you were thinking that slowed you down? Was there anything that you were thinking, maybe you were comparing to other people that you're competing against? And, you know, that's something that I've done in the past is got in my head about that. So it's thinking about within your performance from a mindset perspective, how did you do? And then what I want you to ask yourself from a fueling perspective, how did you do? What did you eat the night before? What did you eat the day of? Did you fuel yourself enough? Did you eat too close to your race? Was your fueling strategy effective? Did you feel like you had good energy throughout? That's something that's important to consider because if you did your high race on no energy, it's like, well, it's not going to be no energy because your body's always going to have some stores of energy. But if you did your race on hardly any food intake, so you didn't eat in the morning before, let's say, and you found that you felt like you had no energy after the ski erg, for example, could it be that was because you didn't fuel yourself enough and give your body enough energy to be able to perform the task ahead? So it's asking yourself, was my fueling strategy effective? Did you take on gels during your race? Did you take on nutrition during your race? If you did, how did you feel before it? How did you feel after it? If you didn't, is that something that you want to try and train in to see if you're going to elevate performance more? Because there's a lot of science base behind having things like energy gel for that spike of energy required when you're starting to fatigue. But was it necessary? Did you need it? Should you try it? These are questions that you want to ask yourself for your next Hyrox event, because you've got time now between now and your Hyrox event to put effort into your training from an exercise perspective, a mindset perspective, and a nutrition perspective, to then get an idea of what's going to work for you for your future event to help you get faster. My next advice applies to those who did doubles for their Hyrox. How was your double strategy? Did one of you struggle more than the other? If so, why do you think that was? If so, what point did they struggle more? Was it the run? If that's the case, how might you do it differently for a future Hyrox? So I always advise people to do it whereby the slower runner starts, the faster runner starts and finishes the station, so that the slower runner can get their heart rate back down following the run, and get it back down just before the next run. But obviously, it's not the same for all doubles, because it depends on where the strengths and weaknesses are. So I would look at that doubles pairing, and I would say, right, station by station, who's faster? Run, who's generally faster? And then I would come up with a strategy specific to them. But what I would say for yourself is start to think about how your performance with your doubles partner was. Did you communicate well? That's a key one. It does my head in when they're training with me and we're doing like sims or whatever, they're coming around and they come into the gym to do the next exercise. So say you're coming into the rock zone to do the next exercise, and they're like, do you want to go first or do you want me to? Like, really polite with each other. I'm like, no, why do you not know before you've come into this exercise who is going first? It's simple. You're on the run. I'm pretty sure you can just have that quick conversation of who's going to go first, and then you know exactly what you're doing rather than dawdling while you're in that rock zone. Anyway, I got very passionate about that one. As well with doubles, I would say for your next one, you might both need a different training plan. So if your training program is aligned and you're doing exactly the same one, but you've got different strengths and weaknesses, it doesn't make sense. It's a bit silly. It's just you're gonna basically have those discrepancies grow further and further as you go towards your next Hyrox. So if your doubles partner is slow at running, they need to spend a hell of a lot of time doing the running side of things so that they can catch up with you for the next one, so that you can increase your running pace for the next one and therefore bring your time down. If one of you is particularly strong and finds sleds easy, but the other one doesn't, then the other one should focus their attention on strength work, getting strong for the sleds. It sounds very obvious when I'm saying it and talking it to you, but a lot of people just kind of, because it's their thing and they're like, doing it together as a doubles, they think that all the training needs to be together and doing exactly the same thing. It's not the case. By all means, train together, of course, like at the same time, but don't always do the same thing. So yeah, consider where your strengths and weaknesses were within your race, and consider if you need to do something slightly different so that you can get yourself ready for the next Hyrox with your doubles partner to elevate your performance and get a faster time. Next question is, did you feel any niggles during your race? Did you feel any soreness in particular areas? Because this is a good indicator that you need to commit yourself to a bit of a strength program alongside your next training blocks to ensure that your body's in a better position, because that's your body's way of saying, look, there's an issue here that needs resolving, so don't just keep training through it, because that niggle can then become an injury, which can then lead you out of being able to do any Hyrox for a long time. That sounded really dramatic. Not necessarily long time, but like longer than you want to be out of doing Hyrox training or a Hyrox. So consider how your body felt throughout. Consider if there's any weaknesses that you do need to target on a strength program, or maybe it's more than that and you need to go and see a physio. But remember that every Hyrox, you're only as good as your body will allow you to be. So if you spending a lot of time doing a lot of training program, but you're not addressing these issues, maybe you've got a muscle imbalance, so maybe one side of your body is stronger than the other, and that's causing issues and niggles and tightness somewhere. If you don't address these problems now, then you might not even make it to the competition floor on your next Hyrox. So just make sure that you take that seriously as well. Anyway, I hope you found this podcast useful. I know that there was some things that I was saying, like ask yourself certain questions that you might kind of highlight, for example, that you need to improve your sled push, but I've no clue how to. And I know that I've not necessarily touched on that in this episode, but it's because everyone's unique. And if I went through every single training tip as to how you can get faster at various things, this podcast would be about 4 hours long. So maybe if you've got an idea of a certain area that you want me to chat about and do a future podcast on, then I can go into detail on that specific area. If you would like help with your training program, whether that's online programming or face-to-face, then feel free to send me a message. And and we can discuss options as to how I can help. But otherwise, I don't want this to sound like a sales pitch, because that's not why I'm doing this podcast. I'm doing this podcast to try and help you to elevate your performance for your next Hyrox. And I hope that by listening to it, you've got a good idea as to how you can improve for your next Hyrox. Also, you've had a bit of a chance to think about what you've been proud of for this Hyrox, what went well, you've celebrated your achievement before looking onto the future. Because I think, me included, I spend so long thinking about what needs to improve that I've never actually fully acknowledged how good I've done in a Hyrox before. And I think that's really important to just, first of all, just congratulate yourself on what went well and what you did well. And also, first of all, just putting yourself in the position to even complete a Hyrox says a lot about you as a person. So well done for that. Give yourself a pat on the back to congratulate yourself on what you've done. But know that there's more in you. You're going to get faster. With the right sort of training program and training block, you're going to get faster with the right training focuses. So it's really important to ask those questions that I've gone through in this podcast to understand where those lowest hanging fruits are, and by that, where the easy wins are for your next Hyrox. Start to put a plan together as to how you're going to achieve it, and then go into your next Hyrox, hopefully faster than you have with this one. But on that note, some courses are faster than others, so it's not necessarily the case where you've got slower if you go to a Hyrox and you get a slower time, because some courses just faster courses because the way that the laps are, the track being less busy. There's various factors that could happen. But what I would like you to do is start to look at how you can improve for your next one. If you've got any questions off the back of this podcast, then feel free to send me a message. I hope you found it useful. I was going to try and get an intro and an outro for this next podcast, but this weekend has been absolutely mad busy. And I really want to get this out, this episode released ASAP, because I know a lot of you have just finished your Hyroxes, or had a lot of people do Hyrox simulations with me at Pyramid Performance in Stockport, half Hyrox and full Hyroxes simulations. So I know that a lot of you will be wondering how you can get faster, so I wanted to get this episode out, but it's a bit annoying because I don't have the jingle. Whenever I say jingle, it reminds me, I don't know why, but is there a song that goes jingle, jangle, jangle, jingle, jangle, jangle, ice cream man van? I don't know if there is, or if I've just made that up, but it always gets in my head, I'm not sure why. What does that even mean? I don't know, it's a bit weird. Anyway, I hope this has been interesting, helpful, whatever. Please let me know if you have listened to it and it's helped you for going forwards for your next Hyrox. And please also, if you do post about it on Instagram, that would be amazing, or Facebook or whatever, because it helps me to reach the engagement and the following, so that more people can be helped with their future Hyrox performances by myself. Because my aim for this Hyrox season is to get as many people as possible, help as many people as possible to excel with their Hyrox performance. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.